And the woman conceiving brought forth giants. Guys, last time we stopped at an interesting point. Genesis 6, the angels are coming and they're mixing with the human. Is it possible? Boy, I tell you, it's exciting. A lot of people don't talk about this thing because it seems like sci-fi, but I found it very, very intriguing. Now, I told you also on the first part that I would stick with the word and not any deuterocanonical, any apocrypha, any other writings, because there is a lot of stuff that is crazy out there. But there is one document, though, that I found interesting because it was used in the Qumran community. Remember the Dead Sea Scroll that they found? Okay, so this book of Jubilee was actually used by the Essenes. They were used actually by the early Christian fathers. And the only reason why they were not canonized in the 4th century is because of that issue of angel mixing with the human. And they said, whoa, 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 that's a bit too much. We are not going to go down that path, so let's keep it out. However, the community in Ethiopia, both the Jewish community as well as the Orthodox community, they're still using that book of Jubilee that has a lot to do with angel, just like Enoch. We're not going to go with Enoch though, but we're kind of looking at Jubilee later. I want to show you some things. But bottom line, there are mainly two trains of thoughts on this. And one says that the sons of God really are who? Are the people from the lineage of Seth. So let's go back in history for a second. We got Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel. Cain kills Abel. Abel is replaced by Seth. So the thought is Seth is actually the godly lineage. Those are people that continue to worship God. Whereas Cain is the evil, is the malevolent, is the dark lineage. And so their interpretation, some people's interpretation is that basically the sons of God are actually the man from the lineage of Seth, look upon the woman from the lineage of Cain, the daughters of men, and mixed. So the mixing of the two brought more wickedness. And that kind of makes an argument also about being equally yoked. But there is one problem though. They're not really taking care then of the offspring of the Nephilim, of the Anakim, of the Rephaim. Those are all mentioned in the word. What do we do with those giants? Well, their interpretation basically is those were tyrants. Those were bullies. That's how they translate that term giants. However, both in Numbers and in Amos, the description is giants in terms of physical size. So we cannot really discredit that or pretend that it's not there. Now, the second train of thought is that these are actually fallen angels. They're not humans. And that is supported by Jude 6 that talks about angels that left their realm. So they're very specific. And also, it is covered by 2 Peter when he talks about God's judgment on those angels that were disobedient. So it seems like those scriptures kind of line up. Basically, both camps, the human versus the angels, give some strong arguments. And I think that we are just making supposition at this point. You know, where do you land, right? It's not really clear without any shadow of doubt which one is correct. So we are just making supposition. However, if we take into account some of the tradition, the oral tradition, and some of the other contemporary writings of that time, I think that the second one actually has some strong legs to really run on, and that's the one that I subscribe to. Think about it for a second. In Genesis 3, Satan receives a judgment from God that her seed will crush him. So you can see why Satan wants to mess around with the lineage, with the descendants of Eve. And then you're looking at actually the cleansing of God. So God sees those giants in the land. He sees these Nephilims and Rephaim and Anakim and says, hey, enough. There is a ton of wickedness out here. Let's wipe everybody out. And also you see God's judgment again on the angels. And one might say, what are these texts actually saying? So allow me to just read one small excerpt from the book of Jubilee. It says, and when the angels, the sons of heaven, beheld them, the woman, they became enamored of them, saying to each other, come, let us select for ourselves wives from the progeny of man, and let us beget children. Then they took wives, each choosing from himself, whom they began to approach, and with whom they cohabited, teaching them sorcery, incantations, and the dividing of roots and trees. And the woman conceiving brought forth giants. For owing to these three things came the flood upon the earth, namely, owing to the fornication wherein the watchers, the sons of God were referred to as watchers, against the law of their ordinances, went on whoring after the daughters of men, and took themselves wives, of all which they chose. And they made the beginning of uncleanness. Quite interesting, actually, because, again, this book of Jubilee is called the Little Genesis. So it's an account of the beginning of time. Different point of view, but quite intriguing. However, the question still remains. These are spiritual beings. How in the world can they do this? How is this possible? And that was the big controversies during the 4th century. Now, let me read a passage in Luke 20, 34, 36. Jesus replied, the people of this age marry and are given in marriage, but those who are considered worthy of taking part in the age to come and in the resurrection from the dead will neither marry nor be given in marriage, and they can no longer die, for they are like angels. Now, somebody can look at this and say, okay, they're like angels because they do no longer die. Angels are immortal. Angels do not need to procreate. It doesn't state in those verses that angels have not genitals or they're not capable of having sexual relationships. I know that is going out there, right? But it doesn't state that clearly. So is it possible then from a spirit being to interact in some fashion with human? And we do have a lot of examples both in the Old and the New Testament. I mean, think about Abraham, for instance. He was visited by the three angels, right? And what did he do? He actually had lunch with them. He sat down and had lunch with them. Think of the most prominent one, Jacob. He is wrestling through the night with an angel of the Lord. So again, there is a physical activity. Think of Lot. Lot, he has two angels coming and visiting, right? What does Sodom and Gomorrah say? Hey, we want to have sex with them. So probably good-looking angels, right? But very much human. That's why they wanted to have sex with them. And what did the angels do? They grabbed Lot and pulled him inside of the house. So the spirit beings have the capability of having, I guess, flesh and blood because they're interacting that way. Think of Peter. He is in jail. An angel of the Lord goes down and slapped him on the face. Wake up, we got to get going. Again, physical interaction. And then another hypothesis in this camp is that people actually were possessed by some of those angels. And we know that when some of the humans are possessed, they're capable of doing some supernatural things. And we've seen that throughout the New Testament. So for those that are saying, oh, well, it's impossible for spirit to actually interact with human, let me ask you a question. Very fundamental question. We base our faith on it. How did God decide to become incarnate? His spirit impregnated Mary. So if we can accept this, why can't we consider then what happened in Genesis 6 as a parallel to this? So again, we don't have enough information, so we're just extrapolating, but I really find it riveting. And we didn't get to the classification of the angels, what classes, what do they do, how do they interact with us. We haven't gotten to that yet, sorry guys. I guess we have to do a third part to this, but I find it intriguing. I hope you find it the same. Thank you for listening again. Have a fantastic weekend, and I'll catch you next week. Ciao.